Now, today's topic is Roy's identity. It is a very important topic, and Roy's identity is very much linked towards with indirect utility function. I have made a video on consumer duality and consumer equilibrium. That video is quite important to understand Roy's identity because I will do a step jump in this Roy's identity, and for understanding that step jump you have to watch the previous video of duality and consumer equilibrium. Now, what is Roy's identity? Roy's identity tells us that a consumer's ordinary or Marshallian demand function can for good x or for good y, doesn't even matter, both the goods or any good, a consumer's ordinary or Marshallian demand function for any good can be derived from the indirect utility function by forming the following ratio of partial derivatives. Now suppose we have a case of good x. Now the Marshallian demand function of that good x can be formed by using this partial derivative. We have to do the partial derivative of the indirect utility function with respect to price of good x, and then we have to do the partial derivative of the indirect utility function with respect to income. By making the ratio of both the partial derivatives, we can get the value, or we can get the Marshallian demand function of x. So at first let us understand what is indirect utility function. Indirect utility function is basically the function of price and income. If we represent the utility function with respect to price and income, then that becomes the indirect utility function. Now indirect utility function actually tells, in the bookish terms, it tells that the maximum level of utility from a given set of prices and income, consistent with the consumer's constraint optimization problem. That means the maximum level of utility that I can get from a given set of price and income. That means obviously there will be a prices of the products or the commodities that I want to consume, and there will be income of mine. So from that prices of the commodities and income, the utility that I can get, and that utility should be consistent with the optimization problem or with the constraint optimization problem. That means the income that I have, it should be within that income. So this is the indirect utility function, which is a function of prices and income, and it is written here beautifully. Now what is the example? Example is basically utility is a function of x and y. It is, I have taken it as utility equals to x into y. It is the utility function that I have taken here, and subject to m is equal to px into x plus py into y. Utility function equals to v equals to m square by 4px by py. How have I obtained this utility function or indirect utility function? For understanding how have I obtained this indirect utility function from this utility function and subject to constraint, you have to watch the video of duality and consumer equilibrium that I have posted, and obviously we will find it just a video before. Now if we do the partial derivative of this indirect utility function with respect to price of the commodity x, and if we do the partial derivative of this indirect utility function with respect to the consumer's income, that is m, and if we do the ratio of both of these are the partial derivatives. At first the partial derivative with respect to price of the good, and then the partial derivative with respect to the income. If we do the ratio of both of these, if we do the ratio of both of these, then we are going to get the Marshallian demand function, as we have just simplified it. After simplifying it, we have obtained to the solution that x equals to m by 2px. So this is basically the Marshallian demand function, and this is the Marshallian demand function, and this is being stated and proved by Roy's identity. So similarly, if you want to find out the Marshallian demand function for good y, or the ordinary demand function, ordinary demand function is also known as the Marshall demand function. If you want to determine the ordinary or Marshall demand function for good y, then you have to find out the partial derivative of the indirect utility function with respect to price of good y, and you have to divide it with respect to the partial derivative of indirect utility function with respect to income. So by that way you can find out the Marshall and demand function for good y. So this is all about the Roy's identity.